Hey, welcome everyone. Thank you for making it out today. On behalf of myself and the co-facilitator of this conference, Adrian Villaseñor Galarza, who is on his way but couldn't be here this morning. I also just want to thank all of the folks who are helping us, our wonderful student helpers, our wonderful staff, Judy Checo, our wonderful program manager. There's been so many feet on the ground for this conference, and we just absolutely could not have even imagined doing it without them. So we are going to try our best to stay on schedule today, and hopefully we will make that dream a reality. But please bear with us if any hiccups do arise. And I want to just encourage everyone as this conference goes forward to really take care of yourself. If you need to leave to go to the bathroom or get a bite to eat, if you need to stand in the back, do what you need to do to sort of make it for the long haul, because it's sort of a marathon, to sit for to sort of process and digest this really important information. And yet some of it might be stirring and activating information. So just do what you need to do to care for yourself as we go forward. And I want to just provide a kind of a brief preface for this conversation, this conference that we're having, which is in a way a conversation. I think that Adrian and I, amidst the kind of the dismal news cycle, we were really craving an island of community and hope, an island of sanity, dare I say, amidst all that has been unfolding, and just amidst this realization that we cannot traverse these times alone. We just cannot do it. And that's, I think, what we've increasingly been doing. And that just want to acknowledge that we're living in an incredibly unusual time in the history of humanity. And our hope is to kind of put our hearts and minds together to plot a course through this perhaps fertile time, even though it is so unnerving to witness the current socio-political landscape. But there is a energy growing. I don't know if you can feel it. There's an energy growing underneath it all, kind of an underground river that is expressing a need for profound change. And I hope that we can harness this energy together and to use this moment as an opportunity for re-enchantment and a renewed relationship with the earth. And I hope that by engaging in these conversations together, we can generate what Joanna Macy calls active hope. By coming together and committing our bodies and our voices to our beliefs, it is my hope that we can begin to enact the hope that we wish to experience. And this isn't a passive hope, a hope for a savior, a hope that things will just turn out okay, but it's an experiential hope. And we have such a wonderful variety of presentations today. And it is my wish that at least one of them will sow a sacred seed of active hope within you that will help you go through this time without collapsing, that will help to waken you out of a sort of numb paralysis that many of us may find ourselves within. At least I know I find myself traversing that terrain from time to time. So before we dive into this rich material today, I thought we could just start with a brief meditation, just to prepare our bodies and minds to receive this information through all of our wisdom centers. So if you don't mind, just taking a moment to soften back. And as you allow the eyes and the hearts and the shoulders and the jaws to soften and unclench. Allowing that breath to carry you deeper into your earth body. Feeling the gentle rhythm of breath like lapping waves. And as that river of breath carries you deeper into the heart, into the belly, into the legs and the feet, you might even allow that breath to carry you beyond the body, noticing if that tendril of breath can reach below the floorboards, through the foundation, into the earth itself, and to see what would it be like to breathe into and with the earth. And as you breathe, allowing the expanding tendrils of the heart to touch the space around you, to touch the earth below you, and to be touched back, to be held as you hold. And with another breath, we'll begin to wind our way back, allowing those tendrils of the heart to spiral in towards your own individual body, and to spiral up towards the eyes, allowing them to soften open. And beginning the return to our shared space. So this presentation is titled The Age of the Perverse, Creative Approaches to Climate Psychosis. And this talk has been inspired by some of my recent doom scrolling habits. When I heard that Donald Trump was trying to convince the public that climate change would be good for the world, and he was trying to put together a national climate assessment written by perhaps the only 5 climate denying scientists that he could find. And while at the same time, Chris Wright, Trump's energy secretary, declared that fossil fuels were the future and even encouraged coal, the most polluting of all types of fossil fuels. When I heard all of this, I felt my heart drop into my stomach. I had a visceral reaction. I froze. I felt all the air and blood had been drained from my body. And I really felt that I was in the presence of the uncanny. And when I came back to awareness, there was only one word that I could think of, And then I thought, oh yes, this is psychosis. This is psychosis. And I don't mean that metaphorically, and I don't mean that colloquially. I mean that literally. And I believe that we are really entering, if perhaps we've already been in this age, but we are entering a new phase of the age of the perverse. This is a period characterized not just by climate anxiety, climate grief, even climate trauma, but by full-fledged climate psychosis. And I don't want to risk littering the field of climate psychology with sort of new novel terms and unnecessary verbiage. I do think there is a good reason to view climate denial as it is currently being expressed as a tipping point towards the psychotic. And, before I delve into the reasons why, I do want to acknowledge that climate change denial is, of course, politically and economically motivated. But even if one concedes that climate change deniers are calculating political actors, it is still worth exploring psychological explanations. One might ask whether bad actors really believe in the delusions that they attempt to sow in the population. There are psychologists such as Brandy X. Lee, who makes a case that, in particular, Donald Trump actually believes the delusion he espouses. Secondly, regardless of the motivation, it is clear that climate denialism is real, with estimates ranging from 12% to 26% of the US population. At the same time, political and psychological explanations for climate denial are not mutually exclusive. They can coexist. Something can be simultaneously politically motivated and follow the structure of psychosis. And before I go further, I want to define psychosis and psychotic defenses in particular. And to do so, I'm going to be drawing upon psychodynamic and psychoanalytic understandings of psychosis. Now, psychosis involves a severance from reality. It's a response to, at least as psychoanalysts see it, an unbearable aspect of reality. Individuals are more prone to psychosis when early developmental needs are not met. Severe trauma takes place or attachment wounding occurs. Analyst and visionary Wilfred Bion believed that psychosis is brought about by annihilation anxiety. He called this a kind of nameless dread. And he said that the fact that the dread is nameless and catastrophic, the fact that it relates to what is both known and unknown and beyond reach, marks psychosis. Now, unlike neurotic defenses, psychotic defenses often involve a more significant and persistent distortion of reality. Neurotic defenses tend to be more flexible and less pervasive. It's important to note that even non-psychotic individuals can engage in psychotic defenses. Now, when it comes to psychosis, delusions and hallucinations are the two primary categories of symptoms. Psychosis can also be marked by fragmentation, which is an inability to integrate different parts of the self and the external world, which leads to a sense of profound disconnection. But for the purpose of this presentation, we're going to focus on delusions. One example of a delusion is psychotic denial, the refusal to acknowledge the existence of something painful or threatening. Now, according to an NIH study, delusions function as coping mechanisms for overwhelming emotions, difficult life situations, or a perceived lack of control. And for delusive individuals, by creating a world where their beliefs are true They gain a sense of order, control, and even protection from the outside world. And so, according to these criteria, Donald Trump and Chris Wright's statements are absolutely examples of delusions. They offer a sense of protection from the existential threat of climate change, in addition to showing characteristics of grandiose beliefs that their willing will make it so. And so in these instances, climate denial represents a full break from reality, total severance. These delusions, it should be noted, are marked by the fact that they cannot be influenced by any evidence to the contrary. This is a mark of a delusive belief. I want to also present here the idea that, of course we could spend the whole conference discussing the pathology of Donald Trump. And, as tempting as that is, I won't do it. Climate denial is not just something that is seeded by a few bad actors. It's an example of what is called shared psychosis. The concept of shared psychosis was first introduced in the 19th century by Charles Lassagne and Jules Falleret, and it was entitled Folie à deux. In this case, one individual induces a delusional belief in another during a psychotic episode. Now, Erich Fromm, who is a psychoanalyst and social theorist and also a member of the Frankfurt School, extended this idea. And he suggested that psychosis could be shared by large groups of people. He called it folie à millions, large groups of people who lose their bearings and contact with reality. Shared psychosis on a societal level is characterized by delusions and paranoia, sometimes influenced by an influential individual, but not necessarily so. So delusions that are based on a shared psychotic disorder involve false judgments held with great conviction, even though their content makes them objectively impossible. In shared psychosis, millions of people distance themselves from reality and become increasingly immersed in a delusional narrative. And I also want to point out here that shared psychosis is amplified by techno-capitalism. Social media algorithms allow the seeding of shared psychosis and allow it to spread and root at a dizzying pace. And Erich Fromm pointed out that shared psychosis is particularly dangerous because it's not recognized as psychotic when it is shared. He said that for most people, reason and reality are nothing more than public consensus. And quote, one never goes mad when no other individual's thinking differs from one's own, end quote. So I want to just back up here for a moment and talk about psychosis in relation to climate change. Psychotic defenses in relationship to climate change are a response to the unnameable, unknowable, unbearable facts of climate change. Climate change looms on the horizon, but its impacts are pervasive and difficult to pin down. We don't know exactly when or where it will hit, and we don't know exactly how it will impact us. Climate change puts excessive demands on the psyche. It can't be processed so easily by individual psyches because there's little that we can do to stop it. Unlike other disasters and calamities that have affected humans, such as wars, nuclear destruction, pandemics, climate change presents a unique challenge because it engages traumatic temporality on a global scale. And this challenges the psyche's ability to create a rational relationship to reality. addition, because we are living in the age of the perverse, in addition to the rising existential threat of climate change, our generation is besought by existential and social anxiety brought about by endless war, loss of faith in governing bodies, lack of a containing myth, lack of vision or sense of identity and culture, weakening social bonds, and a sudden shift in culture that leaves most of us on our screens, where objectification, dehumanization, and disembodiment are the norm. If the core task of adulthood is to integrate different elements of reality, to tolerate conflicting realities, and to manage multiple truths and ideas, how do we maintain a sense of cohesion in this shared climate? Now, to understand this a little bit further, and I'm just seeing the time here, so I'm going to try to speed through some of it. I want to talk about the idea of psychotic parts of the self. Shared psychosis or psychotic denial when it comes to climate change, it's not just something that's happening to those climate deniers over there. According to Wilfred Bion, all individuals possess psychotic parts of the personality. In psychoanalytic thought, psychotic and non-psychotic parts exist on a continuum. And sanity and insanity are a matter of degree, not kind. And so I think what this suggests is that we are all implicate subjects. We all possess some degree of climate psychosis, whether it's through wishful thinking, a desire for an escape, imagination that we are immune, different forms of dissociation or denial. Maintaining a relationship with climate reality is not a given, but requires complicated mental and emotional labor. And so I think it's important to note here that psychotic parts of the self are vulnerable parts that struggle with differentiating between internal and external reality, and that can revert to primitive and defensive states when they're faced with overwhelming anxiety, fear, or trauma. And under stress, the psychotic parts of the self may become more dominant when reality is too much to bear. In a stable environment, the non-psychotic parts of the self can help the psychotic parts to think and reflect and integrate. They can help contain and manage the psychotic fragments. But what if this understanding of psychotic parts of the self works on both the individual and the collective layer of humanity? While we all possess psychotic parts and participate in psychotic denial of climate change, perhaps climate denial is an example of the psychotic parts of the body politic, the psychotic parts of the collective sociocultural body of the United States. If this is so, how do we heal the section of the population who has become severed from reality and under stress, complicated cultural, economic, existential factors, under stress of these factors, decompensated into psychotic fragmentation and delusion? Well, in a therapeutic setting, the therapist or the non-psychotic parts act as a container for these unmanageable thoughts and feelings. And that requires us to create a safe enough environment where these highly defended and vulnerable parts can come forward. And the goal in therapy is not to eradicate psychotic parts of the self, but to help them become less fragmented and integrated into the broader self. And so on a collective level, what we're seeing here when we look at the rampant acceleration of political polarization, we're seeing in some ways an attempt to isolate, reject, and eradicate the psychotic parts of the body politic. And this is a form of fragmentation. This type of polarization mimics what happens in a family when the psychotic member of the family is isolated and stigmatized during a psychotic episode. And so, to wrap things up here and to sort of point towards a collective cure, the first step in healing psychosis is to bring the deluded belief out into the open, to call a spade a spade. There's no doubt anymore with Trump's latest statement that we are facing climate psychosis. And because now we can see the psychosis as it is, there's the possibility for addressing it. As it becomes more visible, there's an opportunity. Now, how do we address this collective psychosis? I think what we have been doing is using the blunt instrument of facts and figures, facts and figures, facts and figures. Look at this evidence, we say to the psychotic parts of the body politic. Look at this evidence. Look, look, look. And because these individuals are engaged in psychotic denial, facts and figures, evidence, only seeks to reinforce their psychotic beliefs. Delusion is not subject to evidence. When you're working with someone who is suffering from psychosis, one of the first things as a practitioner you will learn is that you cannot argue with them about their delusional belief. It does not work. And I want to just put in one more idea here, and at the risk of spiritual bypassing or kind of preemptive meaning, I want to also tentatively bring in the idea here of a psychotic break as a form of initiation. Malidoma Somé says that those suffering from psychotic breaks are uninitiated shamans. Now, I know it's easy here to slip into the danger of romanticizing mental illness, which can be devastating, as well as romanticizing climate denial, which I don't think any of us want to do. But a psychotic break can only become an initiation in certain cultural contexts when it is tended sensitively and delicately, when it is tended in community. And so the question I want to pose to you here is American civilization going through an initiation, like the hanged man tarot, a psychotic reversal of values that heralds a great change? If so, what must we do to nurture this moment that on the surface seems only destructive? And so what I want to draw upon here briefly is to harness the understandings of cultures that deal effectively with psychosis. And one such method is open dialogue. This is a Finnish method for treating psychosis that has achieved spectacular results. It's notable that in open dialogue, everybody who is important to the individual becomes involved in the treatment. The dialogue is open-ended, and the person suffering from psychosis is not argued with. They are allowed to speak, and the emphasis here is on feelings, not thoughts. Without going further into the idea of open dialogue, I want to suggest the idea that we need to engage in intercultural dialogues between climate deniers and climate activists. As much we may feel that this is distasteful, I believe that when dealing with psychosis, this is the only solution. It must follow the format of open dialogues to open the lines of communication and to focus on feelings, not facts.
Any further into that? And we have time for questions.
Yes. I think I can end there, and I won't go further. Thank you, Mary, and thank you for listening. There's a lot of unanswered questions, and this is opening a conversation rather than finishing it. Thank you.
I'm not sure if this will work.
Yeah.
But I would like everyone that has a question to either send it in the chat or raise your hand if you're in the room, and I'll bring the mic to you. Are there questions in the room? Okay, Heather, are there questions on the chat? Just a second, we've got one question in here from Mr. Glover.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Yeah, a lot of what you said is interesting to me, having conversation with some of these folks, and what you said about the facts and figures being blunt instruments.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh, okay, that's what's happening. Yeah, I guess I'm curious, is this, you're speaking from a sort of a US-centric view, is this a US-centric issue, or is this happening everywhere, or?
I think that I'm not informed enough to answer that question. I imagine that climate denialism is happening in other countries as well, particularly those with kind of socio-political agendas that sort of warrant sort of the immediate interests that come from climate denialism. But my focus here is on American culture, because that's what I think that many of us are kind of most confronted with right now, with as Donald Trump takes office and with some of these shocking recent statements.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, and it just, yeah, again, a lot of things resonated, and I think the other thing I just popped in my head is the sanity, insanity as sort of degrees.
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, yeah, lots of ideas and thoughts. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, David.
So Heather, is there a question from the people that are listening into this?
No, no one has any questions.
Okay, great.
Okay, well, that was gorgeous
Thank you.
and thought-provoking and also terrifying.
I could make a comment if I may. I don't know. Sorry if there's time.
Yes, go ahead.
I didn't type into the chat quick enough. I first want to thank Sarah for this beautiful and wise and compassionate presentation. And I'm with you. I think things are really psychotic right now. The world is out of joint. Our country is especially out of joint. And I liked you highlighting psychosis as a defense against overwhelming trauma and suffering. Because one of the things that I grapple with is not to just hate what's happening,
Yeah.
people that are doing it. And although I think there's plenty to be rightly angry about, and anger sometimes is the best response, hatred isn't. And if we see this psychosis as the psychosis of climate psychosis, as a symptom of suffering, then I think it's easier to have constructive and compassionate responses. And I actually think Trump and his cronies are suffering even with all their privilege. But certainly the people, as you described, that get drawn into that collective madness, the reason they're drawn in is because they're really hurting. They're really hurting. And if we know that someone is hurting, it's way easier to have a dialogue than if we think they're evil or bad or simply wrong. So anyway, your presentation stirred this up. I just wanted to say thanks.
Thank you, Will. Yeah, I'm touched by that. And I just, I think that the idea of having open dialogues and kind of addressing some of the political polarization right now feels so important, because I see it happening. I have friends that say they won't even speak with Republicans. And I think that this kind of atomization of parties really only exacerbates the problem. And I like what you say about anger versus hatred, because I think that anger can still be relational. We can be angry, but stay in relationship. When it comes to hatred, it's difficult to stay connected and curious. So thank you, Will, for your comments.
Thank you.
I don't know, I saw one other. Do you have a brief comment? What's that?
We have time for one more
Yes,
question?
go ahead.
We actually don't really, sorry.
Okay.
I think we can squeeze in one question.
Okay, sure.
Okay, go ahead.
Using the model you had of the body politic
Mhm.
psychosis and then
Yes.
a family suffering a psychotic break of a family member.
Yeah.
Relationally, either clinically or just in a relation outside of practice, how do you suggest handling the likely antagonism of the person who's not the climate denier, let's just say me or you,
Mhm.
the kind of paternal or maternal energy we might be bringing as grounded in reality, grounded in science, not turning to facts, but just that kind of embodying a reality principle that the other person is so deeply questioning and struggling with.
Like, how do we sort of tolerate their antagonism towards us? Well, I think that's the question, is how can we tolerate the antagonism? Because underneath that antagonism, as Will mentioned, I think there's so many layers of suffering. And their attitude towards us, you know, as the unconscious turns the face towards us, that we turn towards it. I think this antagonism does go both ways. And that it's only exacerbated when we turn that same time. So I think part of it is patience is learning to tolerate the feelings that their psychosis engenders within us, and being willing to be with that, which is no small task and no small ask. I acknowledge, so thank you. I'll end it there so we can move along. Thanks, everybody.